get you the view now from the General Industry Workers Union of South Africa. We're joined by its president, Mametlwe Sebei. Mr. Sebei, very good evening to you. Thank you so much for joining us. So, load shedding now going to be suspended, at least stage 6 power cuts, but stages 4 and 5 will continue tomorrow. Does that prove the usefulness of the president choosing to stay home rather than go to Davos?
Not at all. I mean, his decision to stay at home is more of a public stunt to create an impression that, he's committed to addressing this problem, that he has a plan when all of what he's done thus far has not been able to work. His whole record in government prove that he's impotent and has absolutely no solution to the crisis. You look at the time when he took over government in 2018, we only had 124 hours of load shedding. That skyrocketed to about 1,949 hours in 2022, in a context where we are also seeing an astronomical increases in, tariffs of ESCOM, which are pricing out many working class and increasingly so even middle class people out of access to electricity.
So how much of that is his fault when you consider that when he became president, the infrastructure, the ESCOM, was already aging? It's got worse, yes, over the last few years. On the issue of the tariff increases, that decision was made by NERSA.
But we've got to also contextualize that. All of that took place under ANC government since 1994. And this is not somebody who was a secondary figure. Remember, he was head of the National Planning Commission. He was at some point a head of the ESCOM war room. He was a deputy president, since at least the second term of President Zuma. And in that period, especially since 2007, ANC government has spent over 700 billion rand on ESCOM. And of course, in that period, we have also seen a decline of about 25% in the capacity of ESCOM. What does that mean? It means there has been systematic looting and plundering, because all of that money has not helped this country. Instead, it has created even more problems, particularly in a form of Medupi and Kusile power station that have generated a debt of over 400 billion, for which this country, and particularly the working class and the poor, are being made to pay in the form of an astronomical tariff increases that are actually rolling back one of the biggest conquests of 1994, which was, of course, access to, electricity supply for many black working class people in this country.
Can the power crisis, can this energy crisis be resolved by an ANC government, regardless of who the president of the party is?
Absolutely not. Because one of the things that I think we're not talking about is how there is a collusion in terms of the corrupt interest in a public service, in the ANC, but also in a corporate sector. I mean, we know from, the Zondo Commission, but also from a number of investigations, including by foreign governments, about the role of Hitachi, about the role of Glencore, and many big corporations that are implicated in the corruption at Medupi and ESCOM. The ANC is part of that. The ANC is intertwined with the corporate plunder of ESCOM and other public assets in this country. It is incapable of overcoming this crisis. And
it's interesting that you say that.
For me, the ANC must go.
Right. It's interesting that you say that, because I'm sure you've heard, even in the various State of the Nation address statements that President Ramaphosa has delivered since he became president around 2018, even when you listen to the Public Enterprises Minister, Pravin Gordhan, whose ministry is responsible for the affairs of ESCOM, they very much remove, to a degree, the current leadership from what has happened in the past. They often blame it on damage done to ESCOM by the state capture years.
Absolutely not. I mean, this president, this billionaire president himself, is involved, in the electricity or in the coal supply contracts to ESCOM. I mean, Shanduga Coal, but also his interest in various mining enterprises that are suppliers of ESCOM, that are part of the problem in terms of the prices that they are charging ESCOM for supply of coal, for which ESCOM is procuring, the same quality of coal, the same quantity for a much lower prices when you are dealing with other suppliers that are not as politically connected. So it is absolute hogwash that this leadership is removed. It's not just only the president, it's many key leaders within the ANC. And the reality is, ANC must go if we are to resolve this crisis. The solution for us is that the working class movement must organize. We think in this crisis, the working class movement must name a date for a national shutdown. As General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, we are having conversation about that. We are going to be taking that with SAFTU, but also we're saying that COSATU and the rest of the labor movement as well. It's not enough that we condemn. It's not enough that we decry the crisis of tariff increases, the crisis of load shedding. It is actually much more urgent that we name a date, we name an action, but more than that, we begin to deliberate on a program of sustained rolling mass action as well as a political alternative to the crisis of capitalism, the crisis of ESCOM, and the crisis of ANC government.
You mentioned a sustained program of action, and that's what I was going to next. So it's one thing to have, as we've seen in the last, 6 months or so, marches led by Labour about the rising cost of living, load shedding, the power cuts are also included in the mandate, the agenda for those demonstrations. But once people have come out, maybe in their thousands, maybe in their millions, a lot of South Africans want to know what changes thereafter. How do you make sure that that results in actual action versus just a minister perhaps or someone from the presidency coming out to receive the memo and saying, we'll look into it and respond to you?
That's the reason I think we've got to move beyond, protest to a political strategy. And part of the problem here is that the biggest organization of labor in this country, COSATU, in reality, is bugging with the hounds and running with the hare, in the sense that they are marching with us. At the same time, they are in alliance and continually assuring the ANC of the support. We believe that this leadership of COSATU has a mandate from their Congress not to support the ANC anymore. They must immediately break from the alliance with the ANC and, of course, other components of the tripartite alliance. They must immediately join with us in building a united movement of the working class to go beyond protest, to make sure that we build a movement that cannot only remove the ANC out of power, which is an urgent task facing the working class in this country, but more than that, to build an alternative that would ensure that not only do we place ESCOM and other public-owned entity on the basis of a democratic control and management of the working class, but actually we expropriate all the key sectors of the economy, because this crisis of energy is but one aspect of the crisis in a system that is, of course, overwhelmed by multiple crises that reflect the contradictions of the system based on a private ownership and profiteering in the economy.
Where does the conversation that's ongoing at the moment about possibly taking ESCOM management and government to court for their failure to provide reliable energy in South Africa, where does that fit into that plan then, the program of sustained mass action to make sure that the crisis is resolved?
No, actually, I was having a conversation with some of our comrades. I'm a shop steward that works for human rights, and in a discussion with our director there to say, how then do we intervene in this? And I think our position is that if the working class movement think that litigation is part of that strategy, we will evaluate it. But ultimately, no court is going to provide a solution to the crisis that can only be overcome on the basis of organization, unity, and the struggles of the working class. And we say the organized labor movement must march to the fore. And what we need at this point in time, in my view, is a date for a national shutdown, which will only be the beginning and the foundation of what otherwise has to be a sustained program of mass action. But more than that, as I've said, we need a conversation in this country about a political strategy for the working class, because what has been happening until now is lack of that. The ANC, but not only the ANC, by the way, the entire bourgeois opposition to the ANC has no solution. You look at the people that are calling for a national shutdown now. It's the DA, whose policies of privatization are the reason we're exactly at this point. Lest we forget that the reason that the ANC has not invested in ESCOM when the planners were owning it of this scenario of a shortage in capacity, of the load shedding, it is because the ANC wanted to sell ESCOM, wanted to privatize it. And we are in the crisis of that because of the outsourcing of privatization of power generation in this country, of the IPPs, and we are saying that all of these policies of the ANC, but also of the bourgeois opposition, have failed. What we need is a working class alternative, and that would have to come from Labour, of course, engaging with communities, the youth movement, the climate justice movement, to say, how do you overcome this crisis? We believe, as one comrade was pointing to me out, Vietnam had a crisis far worse than this. On the basis of rolling out renewable program, installing solar panels in each and every household, they were able to overcome that crisis on a much more urgent basis than we're doing until now.
Mametlwe Sebei, good to speak to you, sir. From the General Industry Workers Union of South Africa, Mametlwe Sebei is president of that organization. Thank you for your time tonight.